My mom said let your brother have the place, he's building his future, after I returned from a work trip and saw my brother living in my house. So I responded, the only thing he built was a trespassing case. I own a small rental property about an hour from where I live. I bought it 2 years ago as an investment. Nothing fancy, just a 3-bedroom ranch house in a decent neighborhood. My previous tenants moved out in January, and I decided to take my time finding new ones because I wanted to do some minor renovations first. Then in February, my company offered me a lucrative 3-month assignment in London. Since the property was vacant anyway, I figured I'd handle the renovations and find new tenants when I got back. Before I left, I made sure everything was secure. I had the utilities on minimum service to prevent pipe freezing, installed security cameras, or so I thought, and asked my neighbor, Mrs. Henderson, to keep an eye on things. I even mentioned to my family that I'd be gone and the property would be empty. Fast forward to last week when I returned. I drove out to check on the property and immediately noticed things were off. There were 2 cars in the driveway, Luke's truck, and another vehicle I didn't recognize. The lawn was freshly mowed, which was strange. When I tried to unlock the front door, my key didn't work. I knocked and imagine my shock when Luke answered the door like he owned the place. He was wearing slippers and holding a coffee mug with Home Sweet Home printed on it. Leo, he said with his huge grin. Welcome back, little brother. Come on in and see what I've done with the place. I was too stunned to speak. At first, when I found my voice, I asked what the hell he was doing in my house. Your house? He laughed. You abandoned this property. Leo, I've been living here paying for utilities, making improvements. Under state law, I'm establishing a claim through adverse possession. I've already talked to a lawyer and everything. I thought he was joking. Luke has always been the entrepreneur of the family, always involved in some scheme or another, though most of them never pan out. But he seemed deadly serious. Get out of my house, I told him. This is breaking and entering. I'll call the police. He pulled out his phone and showed me something on the screen. Go ahead and call them. I have receipts for 3 months of utility payments, documentation of improvements I've made, and a lease agreement. A lease agreement with who? With myself as the property manager. It's all perfectly legal. Leo, you abandoned this property and I'm claiming it through adverse possession. My lawyer says I have a strong case, especially since you've been out of the country and made no effort to maintain or monitor the property. I was seeing red at this point. I was on a work assignment. The property wasn't abandoned. It was temporarily vacant. That's not how the law sees it, he said, still smiling. You left it empty and deteriorating. I moved in, made improvements, and established residency. I'm not some random squatter. I'm your brother who saw an opportunity to preserve a family asset that you were neglecting. Oh no. I was practically shaking with rage. I'll need a formal eviction notice for that, he said calmly. And my lawyer will fight it every step of the way. This could take months, maybe years. Or we could work out a deal. I've put a lot of money into this place. Maybe you could compensate me for my improvements and time, and I'll consider moving out. I stormed off and called the police for my car. When they arrived, Luke showed them his utility bills, a folder of receipts, and printed emails he'd apparently sent me, which I never received about his concerns for the property. The officer said it was a civil matter, and they couldn't force him to leave without a court order. I drove home in a daze and immediately called my lawyer, Patricia. She was equally shocked, but said she'd need to research the adverse possession laws in our state. In the meantime, she advised me not to do anything rash. That night, I called my parents to tell them what happened. Their response floored me. Well, Lucas has been telling us how much work he's put into that house, my mother said. He showed us before and after photos. The place looks wonderful now. He's stealing my house, I shouted. Don't be dramatic, Leo, my father chimed in. Your brother saw an opportunity and took initiative. That's what successful people do. Maybe you two can work out some kind of partnership. Were they insane? I've spent the last week researching adverse possession laws, and while most states require 5 to 20 years of continuous occupation, Luke seems to think he's found some loophole. He's claiming the property was abandoned, and that accelerates the timeline, especially with the improvements he's allegedly made. I went back to the property yesterday with Patricia to document everything. Luke let us in. Legally, we had to give notice, and I was shocked to see he had indeed made changes. The walls were freshly painted. There was new flooring in the kitchen, and he'd landscaped the backyard. He had receipts for everything, thousands of dollars worth of improvements. See, he said proudly, I've increased the property value by at least $30,000. You should be thanking me. Patricia pulled me aside and said this was more complex than she initially thought. While Luke probably doesn't have a legitimate adverse possession claim, yet his improvements and establishment of residency make this a complicated eviction case. She recommended I hire a real estate attorney who specializes in property disputes. The worst part I found out from Mrs. Henderson, that Luke moved in literally the day after I left for London. He told her I'd asked him to house sit and manage some renovations. She thought nothing of it since he was family. I also discovered why my security cameras didn't alert me. Luke had disconnected them and installed his own system, which he's now using as evidence of his security improvements to the property. My work is suffering because I can't focus on anything else. I've already spent $2,000 on legal consultations, and Patricia estimates the eviction process could cost me $10,000 to $20,000 if Luke fights it aggressively, which he's indicated he will. Luke has now sent me a formal letter through his lawyer offering to settle for $50,000, essentially asking me to pay him to leave my own house. The letter details all his improvements and includes a threat to pursue his adverse possession claim if I don't comply. I'm at my wit's end. How is this even possible? How can someone just move into your property and claim they own it? And how can my own family be supporting him in this? Has anyone dealt with something similar? What are my options here? I can't afford a long legal battle, but I also can't afford to lose my property or pay him off. Please help. Update 1. 2 weeks later. I wanted to thank everyone who responded to my original post. Your advice and support meant more than you know during this nightmare. I have an update, and unfortunately things have gotten worse. Following many of your suggestions, I hired a specialized real estate attorney, James Morrison, who has experience with adverse possession and squatter cases. He reviewed all the documentation and gave me both good and bad news. The good news, Luke doesn't have a valid adverse possession claim. In our state, adverse possession requires continuous occupation for a minimum of 7 years, and the occupation must be hostile, without permission, actual, open, and notorious, and exclusive. Luke has only been there 3 months, and no amount of improvements changes that timeline. The bad news, Luke has been smarter than I gave him credit for. Here's what we've discovered. 1. The fake paper trail. Luke created an elaborate false documentation trail. He fabricated emails to my work email, which he knew I rarely check while abroad, expressing concern about the property's condition. He even created a fake email address, similar to mine, and had conversations with himself about property management. He printed all these out as evidence that he tried to communicate with me. 2. The improvement scam. Remember those receipts for improvements? My attorney had a contractor review them. While Luke did make some improvements, he vastly inflated the costs. The $30,000 in improvements was maybe $8,000 in actual work and material. Some receipts were completely fabricated. He photoshopped legitimate receipts from home improvement stores, changing dates and amounts. 3. The tenant complication. This is where it gets really twisted. Luke didn't just claim to be managing the property. He actually rented out 2 of the bedrooms to tenants. He's been collecting $600 per month from each of them, pocketing $1,200 per month of my rental income. These tenants have legitimate lease agreements signed by Luke as the property manager and have no idea about our dispute. They're innocent parties who've been paying rent and have tenant rights. 4. The utility manipulation. Luke put all utilities in his name and has been paying them. But here's the kicker. He's been deliberately running up the bills. He's keeping the heat at 78 degrees in summer, running appliances constantly, and I suspect he's even mining cryptocurrency based on the electrical usage. He plans to sue me for these inflated utility costs if I evict him. 5. The insurance fraud. He filed a claim on my homeowner's insurance for water damage that occurred while I was gone. He pocketed the $5,000 payout and did minimal repairs. I only found out when my insurance company contacted me about the rate increase. The eviction process has begun, but it's complicated by the presence of the innocent tenants. My lawyer says we need to handle their situation carefully to avoid additional lawsuits. Luke, meanwhile, has lawyered up with Sarah Collins, apparently a notorious attorney in our area who specializes in creative property law interpretations. Last week, we had our first court hearing. Luke showed up in a suit looking every bit the responsible property manager. He presented his case eloquently, claiming he rescued an abandoned property that was becoming a neighborhood eyesore. He actually brought photos showing the property right after I left, when it was perfectly fine, that he'd edited to make it look deteriorated, darkened windows, added digital weeds to the lawn, etc. The judge didn't buy the adverse possession claim, but seemed sympathetic to Luke's improvements argument. She ordered a full accounting of all expenses and improvements with a court-appointed assessor to determine actual values. This means more delays and more legal fees. The family situation has exploded. After the hearing, I confronted my parents again. This time, I brought Patricia as a witness. The truth finally came out. Luke has been giving our parents $500 per month from the rental income, telling them it was from his property management business. They thought he was finally becoming successful and didn't want to question it. When I explained the full situation, my mother broke down crying. My father, however, doubled down. So what if he bent a few rules? He said, "At least he's showing initiative. You left the country for months, Leo." Luke saw an opportunity to steal from me. I shouted, "You have other properties." My father said, "You're doing well. Why can't you help your brother get started?" That's when I realized something that made my blood run cold. Other properties. I only have the one rental. My father looked confused. Luke said, "You have 3 rental properties." He showed us the listings. My heart dropped. I don't have 3 properties, but I had been looking at 2 other investment properties before my London trip. I'd saved the listings, done some initial research, even driven by them. Had Luke somehow accessed my computer, I rushed home and checked my files. Sure enough, my backup laptop, which I'd left at my apartment, showed signs of access. My browser history had been cleared, but I found cached pages showing Luke had logged into my real estate accounts, my email, even my banking apps. He'd been monitoring my property searches, my finances, everything. That night, Luke texted me, "I know about the properties on Maple Street and Jefferson Avenue. Shame to let those opportunities go to waste while you're playing corporate ladder in London. Maybe we should discuss a partnership after all." I immediately called James Morrison. He said this was escalating beyond a simple eviction case into potential criminal territory, identity theft, fraud, extortion. He recommended I file a police report and consider getting a restraining order. But here's where it gets even worse. Yesterday, I received a call from Barbara Chen, who owns the property on Maple Street that I've been interested in. "Mr. Leo," she said, "I wanted to confirm our meeting next week about the purchase agreement." I had never contacted Barbara Chen. I had never made an offer on her property. "I think there's been a misunderstanding," I said carefully. "Your brother Luke said you're partners now and that he's handling the acquisition. He provided all your financial documents and proof of funds. We're scheduled to close in 30 days. My hands were shaking. "Mrs. Chen, I need you to stop all proceedings immediately. Luke is not my partner and has no authority to act on my behalf." She was silent for a moment, "But he has power of attorney documents with your signature." I hung up and immediately called James. Then I called the police. Then I threw up. Luke has forged power of attorney documents. He's attempting to purchase properties in my name, probably planning to use the same adverse possession scheme on them. Or worse, he might be planning to take out mortgages in my name and disappear with the money. I've now hired a criminal attorney in addition to the real estate attorney. I've frozen my credit, changed all my passwords, and installed security cameras around my own apartment. I've also discovered Luke has been telling people around town that we're business partners and that I'm the silent investor while he handles operations. The eviction case is ongoing, but it's now the least of my concerns. I'm looking at potential identity theft, fraud, and forgery charges against my own brother. The forensic accountant I hired estimates Luke has already cost me close to $40,000 in legal fees, lost rent, fraudulent insurance claims, and damages. I haven't slept properly in weeks. I've lost 15 pounds. My work performance is suffering so badly that my boss has suggested I take a leave of absence. Luke, meanwhile, is still living in my house, still collecting rent from tenants, and still posting on social media about his successful property management business. The restraining order hearing is next week. Luke has indicated he'll fight it, claiming I'm trying to sabotage his legitimate business operations. He's even countersued me for defamation, claiming my false accusations are damaging his reputation and business prospects. I'll update again after the hearing. To those who asked why I don't just pay him off, it's not about the money anymore. If I give in, he'll never stop. And based on what I've discovered, this might just be the tip of the iceberg. Thank you all for your continued support. And to those going through similar situations, document everything, hire good lawyers, and don't underestimate what desperate people are capable of, especially when they're family. Update 2, 1 month later. This will probably be my final update on this situation. I've debated whether to share this, but I know many of you have been following my story and offering support. You deserve to know how it ended, and honestly, I need to get this off my chest. The restraining order hearing was a circus. Luke showed up with Sarah Collins and 2 junior associates. I had James Morrison and Patricia. What should have been a simple hearing turned into a 3-hour ordeal. Luke's strategy was to paint me as a negligent landlord who was jealous of his success. He presented himself as a professional property manager who had simply stepped in to help a family member's failing investment. He had created an entire fictional company, Phoenix Property Solutions, LLC, complete with a website, business cards, and fake client testimonials. But Luke made a crucial mistake. In his arrogance, he submitted as evidence the forged power of attorney documents he'd used with Barbara Chen. He claimed I had given him authority to act on my behalf before leaving for London. James immediately pounced on this. "Your Honor," James said, "we'd like to submit a forensic document analysis showing these signatures are forgeries. We'd also like to present evidence that Mr. Luke created these documents using templates downloaded from a legal document website 3 weeks ago, 2 months after Mr. Leo left for London." Luke's attorney tried to object, but the damage was done. The judge's expression shifted from neutral to concerned. She granted the restraining order and referred the forgery evidence to the district attorney's office. Outside the courthouse, Luke confronted me, ignoring the fresh restraining order. "You think you've won," he hissed. "I've got more documentation than you can imagine. Emails, texts, recordings of you agreeing to our partnership. You're going to lose everything." That's when I realized Luke wasn't just desperate. He was delusional. He had convinced himself that his fabricated evidence was real, that he deserved my property, that he was the victim. The next few weeks were a whirlwind of legal proceedings. The criminal investigation revealed the extent of Luke's schemes. He had attempted to take out a $200,000 home equity line of credit on my rental property. He had forged my signature on 3 different purchase agreements for other properties. He had opened business credit cards in my name, racking up $30,000 in debt. He had been intercepting my mail using a forwarding order he'd somehow gotten approved. He had installed keystroke logging software on my backup laptop, capturing passwords and financial information. But the biggest shock came when Detective Sarah Williams called me. "Mr. Leo, we've discovered your brother has done this before." My heart sank. "What do you mean 5 years ago in another state?" "Same pattern. Moved into a property owned by a distant cousin who was deployed overseas, claimed adverse possession, forged documents. The cousin didn't pursue criminal charges because of family pressure. Luke just moved to a new state and started over." I felt sick. My parents had known. They had to have known. When I confronted them with this information, they finally admitted the truth. Luke had borrowed money from them repeatedly over the years, always with elaborate business plans that never materialized. They'd refinanced their house twice to cover his debts. They supported his scheme against me because they saw it as his last chance to make something of himself. We thought if he could just get one property, get stable, he'd turn his life around. My mother sobbed. We didn't know he was doing all this. The criminal case moved forward quickly once the DA saw the evidence. Luke was charged with identity theft forgery, a wire fraud, a mail fraud, a criminal impersonation, or attempted grand larceny. Faced with overwhelming evidence and the possibility of serious jail time, Luke's attorney negotiated a plea deal. He would plead guilty to lesser charges, serve 18 months in minimum security, pay full restitution, and be prohibited from any real estate transactions for 10 years. But Luke couldn't help himself. The night before he was supposed to sign the plea agreement, he sent me an email from a burner account. "You may have won this round, little brother, but I know things about your business you don't want public. That London trip wasn't as clean as you pretend. I have documents. Sign your rental property over to me, or I'll expose everything." I had no idea what he was talking about. My London trip was completely legitimate, but I forwarded the email to Detective Williams anyway. Turns out sending blackmail threats while out on bail for fraud charges isn't smart. Luke's bail was revoked, and additional charges were filed. The eviction was finally completed last month. The innocent tenants were relocated with my assistance and compensation for their trouble. They were victims too. The property was a mess. Luke had caused about $15,000 in actual damage, far beyond his supposed improvements. He'd punched holes in walls when he realized he was losing poured concrete down drains and destroyed the HVAC system. Luke is now serving 3 to 5 years in state prison after the plea deal fell apart. The full extent of his crimes kept emerging. He targeted 2 other distant relatives with similar schemes, though neither had progressed as far as mine. My parents and I are not speaking. They blame me for Luke being in prison. "You could have just given him the house," my father said during our last conversation. "Now, your brother is in prison. Are you happy? Am I happy? No. I'm out over $100,000 between legal fees, repairs, lost rent, and dealing with the identity theft. I've had to change every account, every password, every piece of financial information. I still jump when the doorbell rings. I've been in therapy for 2 months dealing with the betrayal and family trauma, but I'm safe. My property is mine again. Luke can't hurt anyone else for a while, and I've learned valuable lessons. 1. Always monitor your properties even remotely. 2. Family can be your biggest threat. 3. Document everything. 4. Trust your gut when something feels wrong. 5. Don't let family pressure override your rights. 6. Prosecute crimes even when it's family. I've rented the property to a nice family with proper background checks and references. I've installed comprehensive security systems on all my properties. I've also started a victim support group for people who've experienced property fraud by family members. Turns out, it's more common than you'd think. To everyone who supported me through this, thank you. To anyone facing similar situations, don't back down. Luke thought he could use family bonds as a weapon. He was wrong. I'm slowly rebuilding my life and my sense of security. It's been the hardest year of my life, but I survived. And Luke, he's got 3 to 5 years to think about what he's done, though I doubt he'll ever truly understand. Sometimes the best revenge is just protecting yourself and letting justice take its course. Stay safe, everyone, and maybe check on your properties this weekend. Final update. 6 months later. I thought I was done updating, but something happened that I need to share. It's a warning to anyone who thinks these situations end when someone goes to prison. 2 months ago, I started getting calls from unknown numbers. When I answered, no one spoke. Then came the letters, rambling, paranoid messages sent to my office about how I'd destroyed the family and stolen Luke's future. They weren't signed, but the handwriting looked familiar. Then Michael, my cousin, reached out. "Leo, I need to tell you something. Your dad's been visiting Luke in prison every week, and they're planning something." It turns out Luke hadn't given up. From prison, he was directing my father in a new scheme. They'd found what they thought was a loophole. If a property was purchased with stolen funds, maybe the sale could be reversed. Luke had convinced our father that I'd used money I'd stolen from the family to buy my rental property. The basis for this insane claim 8 years ago Our grandmother left each grandchild $25,000. I used mine as part of my down payment on the rental property. Luke had spent his on a failed food truck business. Now he was claiming that money was meant to be split between us, and I'd stolen his half. My father, desperate to help Luke and drowning in his own guilt, had hired an attorney to explore this theory. They were preparing to sue me for unjust enrichment and demanding I either give Luke the property or pay him $200,000 his share plus damages. I couldn't believe it. Even from prison, Luke was manipulating our parents, creating new conspiracies, new ways to claim he was the victim. But this time I was prepared. James Morrison had warned me something like this might happen. People like Luke don't stop, he'd said. They just find new angles. I immediately filed for a protective order against my father and documented everything. I also reached out to the prison to report that Luke was potentially conducting fraudulent schemes from inside. The investigation revealed that Luke had been quite busy in prison. He'd been writing letters to other relatives trying to convince them I cheated them too. He'd found a jailhouse lawyer who was helping him file bogus liens against my properties. He had been corresponding with a woman who thought she was in a relationship with a wrongfully imprisoned real estate mogul. He had even started a prison investment club where he was teaching other inmates his adverse possession schemes. The prison transferred Luke to a higher security facility with restricted communications. My father's lawsuit was dismissed as frivolous, and the judge warned him about potential charges for harassment and abuse of process. The woman Luke had been corresponding with contacted me after his transfer. Jennifer was a nurse who'd met Luke through a prison pen pal program. He told her he was a successful property developer imprisoned by his jealous brother who couldn't stand his success. She'd sent him over $5,000 and was preparing to wait for him, convinced they'd build a real estate empire together when he got out. I spent 3 hours on the phone with Jennifer, showing her court documents, police reports, and evidence. She cried for most of it. Another victim of Luke's manipulation. Last week, I got a call from Detective Williams. Leo, I wanted you to know Luke just got another 5 years added to his sentence. He was caught trying to forge legal documents to file liens against properties owned by other inmates' families. He was running the same scam from inside. I wish I could say I felt vindicated, but I just felt tired and sad. Luke will now be in prison for 8 to 10 years total, and I doubt he'll change. My parents have lost both sons, one to prison, one to justified estrangement. They're in their 70s now, broken by their enabling of Luke and the destruction it caused. I've moved to a different city. I still own the rental property, but I've hired a property management company to handle it. I can't drive by it without feeling sick. My therapy has helped, but the trauma of having family try to destroy you doesn't just go away. To those who asked why I shared such detail, it's because these situations are complex, messy, and don't follow the clean narrative we see in movies. Victims often face years of continued harassment, manipulation, and schemes. Family makes it 1,000 times worse. If you're facing something similar, please get therapy early. Document obsessively and don't assume it ends with an arrest. Be prepared for flying monkeys, family members who do the abuser's bidding, consider relocating if necessary, and never underestimate someone's capacity for delusion and manipulation. Luke cost me more than money. He cost me my family, my sense of security, and my faith in blood bonds. But he didn't break me. I'm building a new life with chosen family who respect boundaries and laws. Sometimes survival is the only victory you get, and that's enough. Thank you all for following this journey. I hope none of you ever need this information, but if you do, you're not alone. Stay strong.